Here's something that shouldn't be possible. A small rodent standing upright on a mound of dirt in Arizona sees a person walking toward its colony. In about a tenth of a second, it lets out a single chirp. And buried inside that chirp, one sound, shorter than a hiccup, is the information that the approaching thing is tall, is human, is moving slowly, and is wearing a blue shirt. Change the shirt to yellow, and the chirp changes too. This isn't a scream. A scream means run. This is closer to a sentence. So here's the paradox. If a creature with a brain the size of a walnut can pack that much detail into a single sound, then language should be everywhere in nature. It should have evolved 1,000 times over. And yet, in 4 billion years of life on this planet, exactly one species has ever built the real thing. One. The question isn't why animals are silent. They're not. The world is deafeningly loud with meaning. The question is why that wall, the one only we ever climbed, is sitting there at all. The prairie dog work is real, and it belongs to a biologist named Kon Slobodchikov, who spent years recording Gunnison's prairie dogs at Northern Arizona University. He and his team paraded people through the colonies in different colored shirts, walked different dogs past, even had the same person walk through wearing different things, and the alarm calls came back measurably different. The calls for a blue shirt were statistically distinct from the calls for a yellow one. He published it in the journal Animal Cognition in 2009, and the word he reached for was labels. The animals, he argued, were attaching descriptive labels to predators. Now, Slobodchikov sits on the optimistic edge of this field. Plenty of his colleagues would say labels is already a generous word, and language is too big a coat to hang on a chirp. Hold on to that disagreement, because it's the whole story. Two camps of serious people looking at the same chirp, and one sees the dawn of language, while the other sees a very sophisticated smoke alarm. For most of the 20th century, the optimists seemed to be winning. And they weren't working with rodents. They went straight for our closest relatives. Starting in the 1960s, a remarkable run of experiments tried to do the obvious thing. If apes are so much like us, just teach them to talk. The voice box wouldn't cooperate, so researchers got clever. A chimp named Washoe was raised almost like a human child and taught American Sign Language. She picked up well over 100 signs. A gorilla named Coco became world famous, signing about her pets, her moods, reportedly even grief. And then there was Chimpanzee, a bonobo who learned to press symbols on a keyboard, built up a vocabulary of a couple hundred of them, and, this is the part that still gives people chills, seemed to understand spoken English sentences he'd never heard before. Ask Chimpanzee to put the ball in the water rather than the water on the ball, and he'd often get it right. Watching the footage, you can feel the wall coming down. You think, we did it. We finally have someone on the other side of the glass. Maybe the only thing that ever separated us was that they never had a teacher. And this is exactly where a man named Herbert Terrace walked in, fully intending to nail the case shut in the optimist's favor. Terrace, a psychologist at Columbia, raised his own chimp in the 1970s to prove that apes could form real sentences. He had a sense of humor about it. The linguist Noam Chomsky had argued for years that grammar was a uniquely human, almost hardwired thing. So Terrace named his chimp Nim Chimpsky, a straight-faced little joke at Chomsky's expense. The plan was for Nim to make Chomsky look wrong. Nim learned his signs. He strung them together. On paper, it was working. Then Terrace did the thing that separates a scientist from a believer. He went back and watched the tapes, frame by frame, and the sentences fell apart in his hands. What looked like Nim composing a thought was, on slow replay, Nim watching his trainers, and the trainers, without knowing it, were nudging him. A glance, a tiny shift in posture, an unconscious lean toward the right sign, and Nim followed the cue and got his reward. His longest sentence, famously, was a 16-sign pileup that amounted to give orange me, give eat orange me, eat. Not a thought, just a slot machine being pulled until the fruit came out. Terrace recognized the ghost in the room immediately, because animal behavior science has a name for it. Around 1900, there was a horse in Germany called Clever Hans who could supposedly do arithmetic, tapping out answers with his hoof. He was real, the answers were right, and it was completely genuine, except Hans couldn't do math at all. He was reading the tiny, involuntary tension in the faces of the people around him, who relaxed the instant he reached the correct number of taps. The horse wasn't a mathematician. He was a brilliant reader of human bodies, and so, Terrace concluded, was Nim. This is the collision, and it's worth sitting in the discomfort of it, because Terrace wasn't being cruel, and he wasn't disproving that apes are smart. Nim was extraordinarily smart. The apes learned that making a sign gets you an apple. What they never showed, Terrace argued, was the thing underneath. And years later, in a 2019 book whose title doesn't mince words, Why Chimpanzees Can't Learn Language and Only Humans Can, he put his finger on what was missing. It wasn't grammar, not first. It was something even more basic and even stranger, the idea that a thing has a name. Not, this gesture gets me food, but this symbol simply is the food, points at it, stands in for it, even when no food is around and nobody's offering a reward. A human toddler trips over this discovery somewhere around 18 months and then can't stop. Suddenly everything has a name and they demand to know all of them. The apes, as far as anyone could tell, never made that leap. They had verbs of getting. They never got nouns of being. So picture the two camps again, the prairie dog optimist and the Project Nim skeptic, and notice that they're not actually contradicting each other. They're describing the two halves of the wall. One half is reference, that bizarre flip where a sound stops being a reaction and becomes a name, a little flag planted in a thing. The other half is grammar, which is the part that turns naming into infinity. Because here's what a finite vocabulary buys you once you can recombine it. You can talk about yesterday, about a predator that isn't there, about a predator that has never existed. You can lie. You can promise. You can describe a god. The prairie dog's chirp, as rich as it is a closed set. It can label the hawk in the sky right now, but it can never assemble a sentence about the hawk that came last winter, or the hawk it's afraid might come, or a hawk made of fire that punishes bad prairie dogs. The calls are a finished deck of cards. Our words are a deck that deals itself new cards forever. Why only us? That part is honestly still open. There's a gene called FOXP2 that keeps coming up in the story. People with a certain mutation in it struggle with speech and grammar, and the human version differs from the chimp version. But it gets called the language gene in headlines, and it isn't one. It's one wire in an engine we've barely opened the hood on. The truth scientists will admit, if you press them, is that we know what the wall is made of far better than we know why we're the only ones who ever climbed it. Which brings the whole thing back around to you, and this is the part I find genuinely hard to shake. We spent decades and careers asking, can we teach an animal to talk like us? And the honest answer that came back was no, and chasing it taught us almost nothing about the animals. But it accidentally held up a mirror, because look at what you just did. You took 30-some squiggles arranged in an order you have never seen in your entire life in this exact sequence, and you pulled a brand new meaning out of them without any effort at all. You didn't get a reward for it, nobody cued you, you weren't even trying. As far as we know, not one other creature that has ever lived can do the thing you're doing right now, this second, just by letting your eyes move left to right. The miracle was never that the animals couldn't talk. It's that we can, and that the strangest, most alien ability in the known universe is the one thing we never once stopped to notice we had. If one animal could hand you a single honest sentence back, no tricks, no trainer in the room, which animal would you pick, and what would you ask it? I really do want to read those, so leave it below. And if it's worth your while sitting with the odd fact that your own mind is the weirdest thing in this video, consider sticking around. There's more of this where it came from.